The Wall Street Journal just reported that Cape Coral, Florida is the worst housing market in the United States. And so they cite in their article that foreclosures is the number one reason why. They actually quote an agent in that, but we'll talk about that later. So when I heard the foreclosure data, I immediately thought of the foreclosure king, and that's Jeff Tamarillo. Jeff Tamarillo is a licensed broker and operates here out of Southwest Florida. He also is one of the founders of the Southwest Florida REIA, and he also does a lot of land banking, a lot of acquisitions and wholesaling in the local market. So if there's someone who knows the foreclosure market, it has to be Jeff Tamarillo. Jeff, what was your initial reaction when you saw the report?
The Wall Street Journal tends to write articles with an objective in mind. And in mid-07, when Michael McCorkery came to town, I was driving him around. And it was quite the hit piece on the market. Everybody in the market kind of knew what was going on, but it put it front and center. I was telling you off screen that he was very interested in seeing Tusa's Coral Lakes. And that was one of the focuses of the article, which is one of my biggest regrets in life was not shorting that stock. Because I kind of had an idea that was, I didn't realize how bad it was going to look on Tusa. But I was like, man, I should have shorted that. My father-in-law's a whiz at that stuff too. We could have, a properly timed short on that would have bought a rental a year later, how cheap the prices got. So
yeah, oftentimes when you read these articles, you almost feel like they wrote it before they came down here and they're just looking to validate the data. Even the title of the storyline, it's not that Wall Street Journal is saying themselves, given their research, that this is the worst housing market. They just quoted a realtor. So they got that tag, and that's all they needed to go ahead and put that in the title.
Well, they're using Adam data for the statistical release, which used to be RealtyTrac. They changed their name after the last cycle. If you go way back on my YouTube, there's a video called like 30,000 foreclosures in Lee County, Boulder Dash saith I. What they do is they have a methodology because they do. Here's a problem. Every time I'm on Twitter, YouTube, anywhere, most of the people are attempting to give you national numbers as content because they're trying to make a living off their content. You know, I tell everybody you're getting your science from a philosopher, basically. But then trying to come up with national numbers, it's not actionable. It's entertainment. And we can go through it in the slide deck, but they overinflate judicial states is the basis of what the problem is. And there's some states that the foreclosures happen quickly and literally there's a notice in the newspaper and then shortly afterwards there's a sale. So where Florida, because the debtors have rights, the methodology tends to single that out. When that video, I ran an SEO software I had on it and tagged them in it. And so their VP started reaching out to me and I was hoping they'd sue me. I was really looking forward to getting sued by them. So I was going to, it was going to be a fun moment. But we had a pretty decent dialogue. I give him credit. And at the end, I asked him, well, how do you differentiate between judicial and non-judicial with this big national methodology? And one of the REIA members who keeps up with data too, the next month their report came out and there was a footnote talking about the difference in methodologies with judicial and non, which was kind of like he emailed me, he goes, well, you fixed them even though I don't think you were trying to. And they have changed their methodology since that report. I think it used to be 5 actions now it's down to like 3, I believe. But that's the basis of that. I mean, you've got data that's really just designed to go get subscribers. And then you've got one agent, and every agent I know, if they have 4 or 5 recent sales, market's great. If their pipeline is 0, well, the market's terrible. So, and that's the life of commission salespeople. And that's why it's one of my favorite lines from the movie Wolf of Wall Street, where he says, no one knows where a stock's going, most of all stockbrokers. That applies to most rank and file real estate agents. They read reports because they need talking points, but they're really there to sell. They don't really know the market. I do what I do because I'm deploying my own capital. So I need this money. I'm trying not to lose it. So, it took a while to get it. So I don't want to lose it. And now every time I do a presentation, this is my work done for me and shared with you.
Yeah, that's a good way of putting it. And I think the key that you're highlighting there is saying that you got to figure out what the narrative is. And so, like in this article, we're saying like, hey, they got the quote from a realtor, and the fact that they use a singular digit from a misguided report. And so, again, whenever you look at national data, right, you got to understand that the way it's being compiled is all different. And so, there's a difference between someone, filing for a foreclosure and then resolving it versus the foreclosures actually going through and then being a distress, and losing the property, right? And that's kind of what you're pointing at.
There's so much, the devil's in the details, and it depends on the vintage of the mortgage. If it's a 2012 mortgage, they have a ton of equity and can sell today and make money. If it's a FHA 3% down 2022, they might be slightly upside down, but the short sale on that is a 10 or 15% push. Not like the global financial crisis where they had a $300,000 balance and the property was selling for 50 grand. If I'm the bank, I'm probably going to put that on my balance sheet and control that exit. At least I know I really did what was right. As you know, when you're taking that big of a loss to where on paper, just taking a 10% push to get it off your balance sheet makes sense. And I'm watching banks. I'm watching a couple things. It looks like there's note sales behind the scenes when the rare occasion a note does actually become a certificate of title. And then I'm also watching particularly private and hard money lenders. As long as the people are communicating, they're just walking them through getting out of the deal. And, if you don't foreclose, it's even better because the attorney is a load on a bad transaction. So, I mean, if there's one thing to be taken from this, and if you're watching it and you're one of these people, talk to everybody involved. They will work with you. That's one lesson I think the banks learned from the global financial crisis. They just stuck their head in the sand in '08 because I just think the magnitude of it, they didn't know what to do. I see a lot more aggressively attacking these delinquencies now.
Right. And so one of the things that we're kind of separating as well is in this article, they're talking specifically about the worst housing market. And so the way that I look at it is you have to look at the fact and then the opportunity. And so if you told me that the same number of foreclosures was in a city like in West Virginia compared to a city like Cape Coral, would have to say, okay, let's assume the foreclosure data is exactly the same, right? What other data correlates with it being a bad market versus a good market, right?
Now, let me jump in here. This is what I love. Right as the negative headlines hit, the crescendo lately, we just turned up last month, the first time year over year in 3 years that we beat sales counts. And the month before that, we were like 1,950 sales in May. That's not the worst housing market. And that's, some of these markets you're talking about that they would compare it to based on just the numbers. It would not even, they don't have 1,950. There's a market I'm tracking in Georgia that I want to buy some rural land in, and there's about 10 sales a month in public records.
So if there was one foreclosure there, that would be ranked number one.
Yeah. Well, and, we'll look at the data. The data clearly says, particularly the first slide we put out in these reports shows the last cycle for perspective. So we're arguing about, especially if you're looking at like the pandemic numbers, they shut it all down. So yeah, it's up from the pandemic, but we're still at such an all-time low that it's disingenuous. And that's the nicest way to put it, that they're being disingenuous. But we live in a clickbait world. Everybody's trying to, like right now, the guy that Nick guy that everybody, the doomer of all doomers, he makes a pretty good living off of content. I give him that. But his app has, get this, Fort Myers Beach is the most undervalued part of Lee County. The Reventure app lists Fort Myers Beach. And you're looking at where, you had restaurants that sold for 5 times what they would have before the storm as a pile of 2x4s. So, it's not the most undervalued market. And particularly from a cash flow perspective, you're never going to cash flow a thing in Fort Myers Beach. Maybe if you get lucky and they lock the country down. But it's a tough market to cash flow. Short term, if you've got an amazing property, maybe. But, it's definitely not the most undervalued market, but that's People flock to it. I've had people send that to me, and I'm like, well, then you should buy Fort Myers Beach then. So,
well, and that goes to the point where you have to include a lot of other data. So if you look at, hey, population growth, like where's that going? So even the same number of foreclosures versus another area is like, okay, well, we're still getting the population growth. You look at wage growth increase, right? What is the average salary and which direction is it moving towards? You would definitely say that Cape Coral, Florida is doing very well from that perspective. When you look at just the future outlook of the future employments, the developments, all the things that are gonna make Cape Coral a lot more of an expensive market, yeah, you have to think beyond of just a single statistic.
oh, the cash sales too. I did a study where I ripped out the year over year, and I ripped out the newest 2 years, meaning the new builds. And the cash sales percentage in the county was like 56%. It's really hard to have a foreclosure bubble when 1 in 2 of the sales are cash.
Yeah, and that's what kind of what we're talking about. We're saying like the worst housing market. You're almost saying that like banks don't even want to touch it. They won't lend in that area. Like there's like can't even get financing there because it's so bad. And what we're saying here is we're not the type that's wildly always going to be optimistic. We're saying, hey, have a balanced approach. So some of the things we are seeing locally is, there is a good amount of options that buyers have. So that means that sellers are going to have to wait a little bit longer, and buyers now can be more aggressive if they chose to do so. We've also seen a decline in rents, and they seem to have somewhat stabilized, but we're not free and clear. And so when I read the article, I'm thinking, oh, they want to present the area as being way worse to kind of move the retail buyers kind of out of the way. So they're almost trying to stall that market. And while at the same time, someone's gearing up to make more purchases. Someone's getting cash. Someone's trying to pitch that angle. And I don't know if it's a REIT or who the buyer is, but
all the big Wall Street players have capital raised and are waiting.
And that's the other thing is that if for the worst housing market, it's saying that not even these investment groups would want to invest there. Right. And that's clearly not the case. Clearly, they're just getting ready to start doing another round of investment.
My phone rang off the hook when those articles came out of people that I have not spoke with since the global financial crisis that we did business and they did really well. And he's like, I'm ready. I got the capital. And so as a joke, I sent him a deal out of the MLS, and he goes, well, that's not what I thought it was going to be. I'm like, well, don't believe everything you read in the paper.
Yeah. I mean, people think that there's a lot more distress happening than there is. And again, it's like if you're a homeowner and you have to, and you're currently living in the property, you don't have to sell. So if you don't get that's also why you can't look at just the listings, because like a lot of listings are going on the market and they're just coming off.
Well, you're looking at the silver tsunami, dude. It's been talked about with the stock market for years. And so you have a lot of older people listing some dated houses, which the younger people don't want dated houses. And there's an older generation there that's really good about getting money and keeping money. So I had one of the guys on the reel was like, well, I'm going to go lowball the MLS. And because there's, so many active listings, particularly baby boomers that are trading out to go back home or live with kids or any number of reasons. And I told him, I'm like, I want you to get on Facebook Marketplace and find an old guy named Carl and try and steal his golf cart. And then you're going to understand this is not a bunch of lay down sellers, that it's going to take a long time for them to accept, or there's interest and intent. An active listing is interested in selling. When you price it within the comps, you have intent to sell. And that's another thing with all the philosophers on YouTube and Twitter, that they dwell heavily on active listings. I could take a brand new 3.2, 1,400 square foot, no pool, no water house and list it at $5 million. It's never going to sell, but that would technically be part of their, so like I only track and truly trend I do look at the active just to get an idea of, ask versus bid, same thing with stock market. But I'm looking at more of the pendings and the solds. That's all I underwrite, because the more you look at active listings are a dream. You have a lot of weak agents and a lot of overly optimistic sellers, and it's kind of clouding the picture to where there's always order within the chaos. And there's a very finite channel of the comps in every market. You 100% go, this is what is selling. So but then there's a lot of actives. I mean, I live in a neighborhood that had flooding in Ian. I mean, we had water to our mailboxes in the neighborhood, and you've had some sales that they priced it. Honestly, it's a great buy. And then the next thing you know, you've got the same house listed $200,000 higher, four doors down, because they know what they got. So that's more of the issue that I see in the market is you've got sellers that are way behind the curve. You got an agent that'll take a listing because they get to put a sign out and have something to market and something to talk about, and figure eventually they'll whittle the seller down and get it in the strike range. But the active listings are so misleading, and inventory's come down quite a bit too. Generally, everything I see in the media is 90 days behind what the market is today. We're down to about 8.5 months inventory. I mean, that is aired towards the buy side, but that is not 2008. My favorite thing, I saved the headline, was in 2008, they said we had 20 years inventory of condos in Cape Coral. Not Cape Coral, Lee County, but that was primarily Cape Coral. And within a year and a half, it was down to like 7 months because the prices hit a point that the buyer said, that's a great idea, give me one. And so, it's kind of like using a cash on cash return, an investment. That's only, and that gives you a spotlight at this exact moment. And most of these articles are pinpointed at 90 days behind an exact moment. They're not even current with the market. I wish we had the ability to trade futures in real estate. I would be a billionaire. So, because everybody's way lagging behind the actual market.
So with that, I want to end today's video with our predictions. So Cape Coral right now is down about 11% over the last 2 years. I see that trend slightly continuing, but I look at a lot of the permit data, and a lot of the supply is coming actually from builders. And I'm looking at the permit builders, and they've been slowing down since 2021. And so I think we're going to get to the point where there's just a lot less builders building, and we're going to be running out of supply very quickly. I'm also looking at the Fed data and saying that there's no way that interest rates are going to stay this high for another year. So I think they will continue the trend for the bulk of this year, but around November or so, we'll hit that plateau, and then April, we'll start seeing a reversal on prices. What are your predictions?
Yeah, it's going to be a long, hot summer. So it is a long, hot summer right now. Generally, the best time to buy if you're looking for value is August, September, October. When it's the hottest here is the best deals in real estate. When the weather's absolutely perfect, everybody's here, so there's more buying activity. It's just simple supply and demand, and we are inverse from the rest of the country. Without a significant jump in foreclosures, and I think last month there was 72 in the whole county. So I don't understand where that data came from. But because foreclosures represent downward price pressure. Nothing runs a market up like a bank giving out, easy liquidity. And then nothing runs a market down like the same bank cleaning off its balance sheet. That was essentially the global financial crisis. They threw so much liquidity in, no income, no asset, many as you want to borrow. And then they, absolutely drove the market down, cleaning off their balance sheets. Ironically, those bankers, nobody missed a paycheck. So it was just, they didn't have the nice bonuses they're used to, but nobody missed a paycheck. So the market, we're down. Most of what I look at is the county. I do track the submarkets. We're down about 13% from May to May, 22 to 25. And I honestly see some more coming off, but the pendings are jumping up as those sales counts start to jump up. Like March of 08 was a critical moment. It's the first time our sales counts came up year over year. Now, that did not mean the negative price pressure stopped in March of 08. That was actually the beginning of the heavy work. I just don't know how far this has to go. I talked to a builder yesterday who's just going to start putting tenants in them and keep them. If you look at Lennar a few years back, put in their 10K, they were going to start doing a build to rent. They are now the number one owner of single family non-homesteaded properties in Lee County, that LLC is. So it's a totally different market. I don't think you're going to see the MLS get flooded because there's so many institutional buyers. Now, if you're the bank and you want to protect your comps, or more importantly, just have less brain damage, you just sell the note. You go through the foreclosure process. When the certificate of title happens, the person that bought the note just automatically gets transferred the certificate of title and it's done. More importantly, whatever they do with it, they do with it, but that doesn't now show up as an REO. And I'm starting to see a little bit of that. I think the big multifamily that everybody's salivating over, I honestly think that's exactly what's going to happen with that. We won't see it. So the market learned a lot from '08 and will make new mistakes. They're gonna, that law of unintended consequences. But yeah, there's a little bit more downward price pressure coming. And then the baseline is, if the foreclosures shoot up, then the joke is I'm going in the bunker. So, but that's why I do business in Georgia and other areas now too, to get out of just Southwest Florida. There's plenty of markets in the country to do business in. But if the foreclosures don't trend up, it's going to be kind of a nasty summer. I wouldn't want to be a builder holding inventory, particularly a builder holding inventory who doesn't have the ability to monetize the rest of the sale. Like if you walk into a national builder using their title company, using their mortgage company, there's other ways they're offsetting the loss, to where if you just built through some investor group and you're just on your own and no ability to offset any of those losses, then you're, either going to put a tenant in it and see what the market brings, or take the loss. Yeah, let me share one more thing too, that I call it the Baker's Act moments. There's always these moments where the investment, the play in hindsight would have gotten you Baker's Acted at that moment. In early 2006, if you sold your entire portfolio and bought gold, your family would lock you up. Fast forward 2 years later, you were absolutely brilliant. You were 5X in the gold, and then buying the real estate back at 500% cheaper in some cases. I mean, some cases those never lived in Lehigh houses were 40 grand, 35 grand. So it's, you look at when we locked the country down. If you would have went to a new national builder and bought every home they had sitting there on one of those extremely cheap mortgages, your family would have probably locked you up. In hindsight, a year and a half later, it's absolutely the smartest play you could have ever done. So, what appears insane at the moment tends to be the best deal, the best idea. That's because that's the way humans work. And I love going to these, especially the Cape Coral forums when there's a housing post. I don't understand that when the most expensive asset in your life gets cheaper, you shun it. So everybody, at some point, the most expensive thing is, your home, unless you're stupid and it's your truck. But it should be your home. And when it gets cheaper, they won't buy it. But when it gets more and more expensive and unsustainable, they stand in line to buy it. That's the madness of crowds. So I would tell you, that be bold when others are fearful and fearful when others are bold. Starting to get bold because there's a lot of fear. And I see the people that I would never take financial advice to freely on social media giving financial advice. One of the local contractor calls it the 550 credit score crowds running through Facebook right now, giving everybody financial advice.
And that's typically who you tend to hear, is all the people who have time to post their thoughts online, right? Most of the people that are busy actually making moves, they almost want to keep what they're doing a secret. They actually don't want to share with everyone what their plans are. I think, to summarize, Cape Coral is a market where you want to understand what you're doing and understand what your game is. And there are definitely boringer markets out there that exist. Some of them are in Georgia, North Carolina, and Central Florida that just don't have a lot of things changing. And some investors like more of those boring markets. I do want to thank you for your time today. You've been very generous with your time. And we'll definitely be tracking the data. And where can people find you?
Well, if you want to find the foreclosure data, go to swflreia.com, hit the blog. That's where the posts are. Shoot me an email, jeff.southwestfloridaria@gmail.com if you want to collaborate. If you got a good deal, be happy to buy it, JV with people. Joe Giz, I like money. So if you got a good deal, let's make money.